Hello Algebra 2. This is going to be the last of the mini videos for tonight, for in other words, Chapter 2.2. I'd actually hoped that I would be able to make one more video after this on a fourth topic, and in that case I'd hoped that it would focus on comparing parallel versus perpendicular lines and also comparing horizontal versus vertical lines. But I'm unfortunately going to have to do that in class. So we're going to wrap it up here with this third mini video on estimating and comparing slope. Let's talk about estimating first. There are really three steps to it. First of all, make sure that you understand what positive slope looks like versus negative slope. When I've taught this in the past, the way that I quickly get heads nodding around the room is if I say positive slope looks like good news on the stock market. And most people would recognize that if it's going upward from left to right, that's good news on the stock market. And if you're reading left to right and it's going downwards, that's bad news, or in other words, negative news, or in other words, negative slope. Second of all, there are two lines that you have to quickly kind of imprint on your mind and recognize immediately and be able to visualize. There are the two 45-degree lines. I'll flash between the two of them. Whoops, I guess not. That one, the brown one, and let's go back to the green one, that one. This green one, this is a positive 45 degrees. And as indicated here, a positive 45-degree angle has a slope of 1. Why? Well, pick any point on the line. Let's say that point. The x and the y values, or the x and y coordinates for that point, are going to match. And so you're going to have a slope of 1 over 1. So this positive slope of a 45-degree angle has a slope of 1. Similarly, the mirror opposite, a negative slope that also has values that essentially match, at least in terms of absolute value, is going to have a slope of negative 1. So for example, if I went negative 1 and up 1, I would hit the point. Or if I went negative 3 and up 3, I would hit the line. So that's what a negative 1 slope looks like. And back here was what a positive 1 slope looks like. So if you put those together, now the third thing is to recognize what's a line that looks steeper than either the 45 or the negative 45, and what's a line that looks shallower. So let's superimpose what we just generated. The green line is a slope of positive 1. The brown line here is a slope of negative 1. Then maybe it's easier quickly to recognize, well, you may not know that that's a slope of negative 3, but you know it's steeper than negative 1, so it's going to be a higher absolute value than negative 1. Negative 3 is a perfectly good estimate, but you might have guessed that was negative 5 or negative 4 or negative 2. I'm not so concerned about that, but you should not have guessed that it was negative 1/2. Likewise, over here, this one is clearly shallower than the green line, so in absolute value terms, its slope should be less than 1. So a slope of 1/2 is a perfectly good guess, but you might have guessed 1/3 or 3/4, and I'm not worried about that right now. Remember, we're just trying to quickly estimate. So therefore, based on that, how would we estimate the slope of this line? Well, a 45-degree line, let's see if I can quickly draw one, would be roughly, let's see, roughly like so, right? So this is steeper than 1. So I'm going to guess it's somewhere around, it looks very steep. Maybe that's a slope of 4. I'm not worried about it. Now what I want you instead to do is hit the pause button and make your own estimate of what the slope is there. Okay, I'm going to assume that you did that. You've paused, and now you're ready to talk about that. Well, that's clearly shallower than 1. So a quick guess of a slope of 1/2 or 1/3 is probably a good guess. Let's try another one. Hit the pause button and come back, and I'll tell you what I think the slope roughly is for that one. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've made your estimate. Well, remember, a slope of negative 1 would go along this line, so that's steeper than negative 1 in absolute value terms, so I'm going to guess that's roughly a slope of negative 2. It might be negative 3. Now, even if the slope of your line doesn't go through the origin, you should be able to make a good estimate. So make an estimate of what the slope is for 17 and the slope is for 18, and then I'll tell you what I think. Okay, I'll assume that you're done and you've done that. Now look what I've done. I've drawn here lines that mimic these, but are either the negative one like this one is, or the positive one slope here. Well, look at this positive one slope that I've drawn here. It seems to be parallel to that. I said I wasn't going to talk about parallel lines, but I have to here. It certainly looks to me like this has the same slope as the red line. So I would guesstimate that the slope for this is 1. Now in this case, the blue line is clearly a negative slope, but it's shallower than the slope of -1, so I'm going to guesstimate that it's maybe -1/4 or something like that. If you need to, you can move this line and see what I mean. It's clearly shallower than the other one. Okay, now how about comparing slopes? Well, remember what the textbook says, the slope with the greater absolute value is always steeper. Highlight those words absolute value for yourself. And then look at this graph again. Whoops. There, that's back in place. Now, if the absolute value is the issue that we look at, then that would mean that a slope of -3 is, as I said before, steeper than a slope of -1/2. So this -3 is a steeper slope than this one, which is a slope of -1/2. And similarly on the right side, the slope of +3 is steeper than +1/2. And that also means that -3, which is this line, is actually steeper than +1, because in absolute value terms, this is steeper than that. If that's not clear, then think of it this way. If this slope, this mountain with a slope of -3 versus this slope, the mountain with the slope of +1, were the two choices of mountains that I could stand on and walk down, which would be the steeper one to walk down? Well, clearly that would be steeper to walk down than this one would. So I hope that explains why, even though this is negative, it's actually a steeper slope than this one with a positive slope. All right, so now go ahead based on that and calculate for yourself which is the steeper of these two lines. All right, I'm going to assume that you did that. You've hit the pause button, and now you're back to see what I got. So let's look at line 1 first, the one that I've done in blue here. The slope, as I've calculated it here, is -2. For line 2, I've done it in red, and I've calculated that the slope is -3. The greater absolute value is here at -3, so therefore, as the textbook says here, line 2 is the steeper one than line 1. That's it for this mini video, and that's it, in fact, for all of Chapter 2.2, but there is homework, remember, some problems to do out of the textbook on the website.